This episode is brought to you by Dogfish Head Craft Brewery. The Grateful Dead and Dogfish Head have gotten the band back together with the release of Grateful Dead Juicy Pale Ale, a light-bodied pale ale brewed with sustainable Kernza grains, granola, and heaps of good karma for a refreshing brew that's music to your taste buds. Available nationwide. Visit dogfish.com to find Grateful Dead Juicy Pale Ale in your neck of the woods. Dogfish Head Craft Brewery is located in Milton, Delaware. Please drink responsibly.
Discover Ralph's Club New York, the new fragrance by Ralph Lauren. With blackcurrant, vanilla, and sandalwood, this scent embodies the sensuality and confidence of Usher. Like the city that never sleeps, this masculine fragrance lasts for 12 hours. Ralph's Club New York. Ralph Lauren. Shop now at Macy's.com.
The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox is on Hulu. In 2007, Amanda Knox was studying abroad in Italy. She had no idea her dream would turn into a nightmare. Inspired by the actual events of her wrongful conviction and 15-year fight for freedom, watch the new Hulu original series, The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox. Now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. From streaming to shopping, Prime helps you get more out of your passions. So whether you're a fan of true crime or prefer a nail-biting novel from time to time, with services like Prime Video, Amazon Music, and fast free delivery, Prime makes it easy to get more out of whatever you're into or getting into. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to learn more.
Hellmann's believes they can turn any mayo hater into a lover. So, if you know someone who thinks mayo equals bland, show their taste buds the truth and challenge them to try Hellmann's flavored mayo. With irresistible flavors like Hellmann's spicy mayo, garlic aioli, chipotle, and Italian herb, they'll be eating their words. Challenge haters to try Hellmann's flavored mayo and get them to eat their words. Learn more at hellmanns.com/eatyourwords.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse on your favorite streaming platforms. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. And now, you can find the Red Treehouse on Patreon. Join the Red Treehouse community for as little as $3 per month and receive exclusive member benefits. Simply go to patreon.com/Red Treehouse. Important note: sources for this episode can be found in the show notes. The Red Treehouse is dedicated to my dad. I love you, Pop. In this episode of the Red Treehouse, I'm going to read you a terrific short horror story, A Voice in the Endless Dark, written by E.M. Otero. So sit back, turn down the lights, pull up the covers, and pay close attention as I read A Voice in the Endless Dark. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse. A Voice in the Endless Dark, written by E.M. Otero. I am a prisoner of my success trapped in an asylum, built from the corpses I made. I would say I am nothing special, just a mote caught up in the cosmic blender that is this place. That's not true, though. There were plenty of other men here, some bigger and stronger, but nonetheless, I still ended up digging their blood from under my fingernails with my teeth. Existing in this silent contemplation gives a man a lot to think about. In isolation, there is no filter for bullshit. With the distractions of daily life, you could lie to yourself indefinitely. Sitting here, in this stone cell, there is no hiding. I am laid bare for the judging eye of introspection. Despite my name being Gabriel, I was no angel or saint, so I had things to answer for. Perhaps this was my tribulation and my trial. When I gazed inward, I could see the roadmap of my rage and the voice of darkness and where it brought me, how it altered the course of my life, and how it aided me after. I could have killed these men without it, but there were other things. Things that I have seen tear men apart and keep the corpse to eat their prize. In blind red fury, I have killed these creatures as well, to the surprise of the alien spectators. I don't know if they ever had a human rip out the throat of one of these monstrosities. They must have thought it was a fluke, because they sent another after me, and I did it again, and again. I had an advantage, but I wouldn't say I was special. Nihilism was the operating system I worked on, but that didn't mean I couldn't acknowledge that there was something different with me. Furious with my father, I levitated a penny about an inch over a table when I was 5. I spent the next 2 days in a coma recovering from acute neurological strain. The doctors thought I was going to die, but as I drifted in the dark away from my life, something saved me. A voice in the endless dark. At 9, angry at me for causing my mother's madness, the voice whispered in my ear as the rage took hold. I crushed his jugular during the beating and dropped into the warm embrace of darkness once again, soothed by the sweet susurrations of that voice. When I woke up in the hospital, I felt less than I was, like I had left a defining part of me in that endless dark. I brought something back though, a transaction I didn't fully understand. The doctors blamed my father's death on an aneurysm, and my unconsciousness on a severe concussion. My stepmother knew though. She was there, and didn't speak to me again after that. She was frightened of her own son. One of the robed creatures, my warden, clinked its talons against the cell bars, and its crocodilian grin ignited the furnace of anger in my chest. The alien intelligence behind its slitted eyes was anticipatory. It knew what was waiting for me. I rose from the stone floor of the cell as the creature opened the door. 2 more of the creatures were next to it, with spears poised to run me through. I walked out into the helix pathway that looked down into the Colosseum. The arena walls told a savage history written in the gore of its contestants, some of which I put there myself. I walked down the spiral of cells and past a menagerie of unlucky participants. Some were human, most were not. Creatures snapped their jaws at me. One tentacled monstrosity reached through the bars, grasping with suckers that could take my flesh off. I grabbed a hold of its spongy flesh and pulled hard, slamming the humanoid squid against the bars. The reptilian guards behind me hissed and barked in their incomprehensible language. The other inmates screeched and howled, slamming against their bars. I felt the point of a spear against my back, and the warm trickle of my blood. I took their subtle suggestion and moved forward. They were all eager to see me die. They guided me to the armory at the bottom of the helix. I flexed my hands in anticipation and wondered what horror they had in store for me today that they wanted me armed. I grabbed my usual weapon, a simple bastard sword. There were no ornaments, no special crossguard, or flourish on the gray blade itself. I felt the weight and the familiarity of the worn leather in my hand. There were more weapons and armor, but I needed nothing else. I walked out into the arena to a chorus of alien exultation. The helix towered above, and higher still was a sky filled with unfamiliar stars, and the planetary ring that gave off more light than the moon ever did on Earth. A booming voice spoke to the crowd, quelling them into silence. I long ago gave up trying to find its source. The darkness whispered to me,
"It's time to play, Gabriel."
The door opposite me opened with mechanical smoothness, and then 2 others on my left and right opened as well. I stood poised with my sword and pushed that dark voice away. If the darkness wanted more of me, it had to wait. A man walked out across from me. He was shirtless, and at first I thought he was wearing armor on his arms. When a blade slid out of both forearms, I realized it wasn't armor. His arms were mechanical. On the left came out a man with a topknot and a katana. On the right was a man with a Roman-style gladius. This wasn't the first time I had fought people from seemingly different time periods of my own. The gladiator was shouting in Latin, and the samurai was definitely speaking Japanese. Then the man with the cybernetic arms across me spoke in clear, slightly accented English. "You're mine." He was targeting me specifically. He must have seen me fight before and knew I was a threat. We heard a bellow, and the cyborg charged me with inhuman speed. He went for a stab, and I pivoted, going to strike him with the sword, but he swiped my legs. My sword went spinning aside, and as I hit the ground, the cyborg blades were viciously descending to impale me into the ground. I felt rage boil in me, and the dark voice screamed. I wondered at this moment what I was fighting for. What was the point of still being alive in this hellhole? These creatures never promised to release me. They barely rewarded me for winning the fights. Was this worth it? Was it worth it to give a little more to that voice just to walk away? I thought about my wife, my daughter, the 2 best things I didn't deserve. I thought about their smiles, the feeling of them in my arms. I wondered if they were missing me, if the time I spent here differed from back on Earth. Had it been a few minutes, weeks, centuries? White-hot rage filled me, not enough to let the voice in, but to use the gifts the darkness left behind. The cyborg's blades stop an inch from my neck, and I see the confusion and frustration on his face. He strained, trying to bring them down on my neck, but my spectral hands had a firm hold. With this invisible telekinetic grip, I pulled outwards away from his body till they tore off. Blood and other fluid rained down on top of me, and the cyborg fell to my side, screaming in pain. The gladiator and samurai stopped their battle and stared at me, stunned into paralysis. I mentally reached for the severed metal arms, with their blades still out, and launched them at the 2 stunned warriors, pinning them to the walls. I picked up my bastard sword and walked towards the cyborg as he tried to get to his feet, using his torso and knees. Bloody wires and tendons hung from the gaping sockets in his shoulders. I kicked him over on his back and stood with my feet on either side of his head. He looked up, not with fear, and not begging for mercy. He spat and said, "You should fight for us, not for them." Then he presented his throat. "Get it done." I sank the sword in his gullet and looked out at the Colosseum. I still couldn't see the stands, but what I could make out were the other cells. There were hundreds of human faces staring out at me with fear, anger, and some, most disturbing of all, with hope. I pulled the blade from the cyborg's neck and tossed it aside. This one did not differ from every other person I killed. It didn't affect me. I wouldn't fall asleep with his face haunting my dreams. His words, though, "You should fight for us." That sank into my chest like a serrated knife. The robed creatures came out with their spears and harnesses to force me back towards my cell. Their movements were so distant from the well of introspection that I barely acknowledged them. "You should fight for us," echoed inside my head. What was I fighting for? I felt the whisper of darkness gnawing at my brainstem, as if to say, "You fight for me, Gabriel." "No, I do not," I sneered. A clamp clanked around my neck with a loud metal twang, and before I could react, an electric shock turned everything black. The dismal situation of my birth was common knowledge in my small town, despite my father's tendency to beat the shit out of anyone who talked ill of my mother. It was always her honor he was defending, not me. She was mentally fragile from what I had gathered. I had learned that from a very young age, my mother couldn't handle any kind of emotional stress and became prone to self-harm to cope. This was at least what the doctors referred to explain what she had done. I had twin scars on my back. My mother referred to them as the scars that were left when God took my angel's wings so I could live on earth, when in reality, they were a gift from her. During my mother's pregnancy, my father came home from work to find her stomach cut to ribbons. At first, my father thought someone attacked her, until he saw the bloodied knife in her hands. When the police and paramedics arrived, my father's hands were bleeding from wrestling the weapon away from her. My mother had told the police that she was carrying the devil's child, and that it needed to be killed. Apparently, she claimed she had been hearing voices coming from her stomach for months, and that strange things kept happening around her. Doors slamming shut, things levitating, and supposedly a feral dog burst into a red mist after snarling at her. The doctors thought for sure I would be dead in her womb, but miraculously, I was still alive. They did an emergency cesarean and stitched up my back. If the entire situation hadn't been a grisly nightmare, they would have called it a miracle. Instead of being named a miracle baby, I had been relegated to an omen. The devil's child himself, who was born of carnage, and who was too powerful to be killed even as a fetus. I came back to the world of the living in a cell, still covered in the cyborg's blood. I looked around and saw what I already knew. It wasn't the same cell. They put me in a new one, further down the spiral. I often wondered when they did this if I was inhabiting the space of someone or something I had slain. Waiting for me was the voice of darkness, cackling from the shadows of my mind.
You're still just a little angry boy who can't fight without me.
I long ago gave up trying to figure out what the voice was. For the longest time, I figured it was a demon, or the devil, or some derivative. When I eventually asked it, it would say,
I am not that simple, little boy. No horn-headed, red-skinned thing am I. No. I am a friend, a liaison from someplace else.
It would never expand on where it was from, but the idyllic little voice was with me from as far as I could remember. It was always whispering, telling me things I shouldn't know, beguiling me into letting it help. Only any time I allowed the darkness in for its aid, it took payment. First it was subtle, but keep taking paper-thin slices off a roast, and before long, nothing will remain. It confirmed my suspicions when questioned.
Nothing is free, little boy. My gifts come at a price.
With each gift, it took its incorporeal pound of flesh. Leaving what exactly? I stared out at the other captives in the Colosseum's helix, angry that it had never occurred to me to fight for others. To help, not just survive. Maybe communicate and plan an escape. I knew this idea never took root in my mind because I was missing the fertile soil for that type of epiphany to grow. That day, I watched others fight in the arena, something I never did before. Not because I couldn't stand to see others die, but because it was ultimately pointless. We were in some kind of hell with no escape. Why get invested in others' suffering? Only now, those words echoed in my head. You should fight for us. So I did. When a human fought against some kind of creature, I offered my aid. Subtly, of course. I used my ethereal hands to nudge a man's spear into a killing blow. Another time, I caused a humanoid crocodile to trip, allowing a naked man with an axe to decapitate the creature. I couldn't help everyone, showing off what I could do earlier. They may suspect my tampering. I watched many die, torn apart and eaten. I watched men kill other men, then kill women, and even children. After hours of this, I laid down on the stone and attempted to sleep to the sounds of death outside my cell. I knew I should have felt something. Remorse, melancholy, even fear. Instead, I felt anger. The quiet kind that percolated below the surface. The kind that leaves you clenching your fist, driving your nails into your palms.
If you truly want to help, little boy, I can give you all the tools you need.
The darkness whispered in my mind.
We could tear this place apart.
I let the darkness take full control only once. Other times, it only held my hand, like a parent teaching a child to use a fork. The small town I lived in was very religious. There were more churches than anything else. My father rather liked the evangelical church that was down the road from where we lived, mostly because they had children's Bible study on Saturdays and Sundays from 8 to 2. So he got to drop me off for hours at a time and do whatever he wanted. I never got to know what a normal Sunday school looked like, but I was certain it wasn't this. First off, they separated the children by 2 standards, clean and unclean. During the study, the clean children would torment us, calling us names, reciting scripture, and while we washed their feet. They promised us we would be one of God's flock once the pastor purified us. This process of purification meant the pastor had to take the children into private chambers to exorcise them of demons. I remembered watching some kids from the unclean group with me leave the pastor's chamber after their exorcisms. They looked hollow, broken, and wouldn't look anyone in the eye. The darkness whispered to me then,
He is no man of God. He calls you a child of the devil, but he is the one possessed by evil.
At this time, I didn't know if I should believe the things it was whispering to me. After all, I had been getting told that anything like this was devilry. I saw the truth in the darkness's words, though. I saw the pain emanating from those kids, one after another, broken by his evil. Then one day, it was my turn. The pastor did what he always did. He presented the next child en route for purification and pronounced all their sins. For me, the pastor ripped off my shirt and turned me around, showing off the twin scars. He told the kids that these were the marks of the devil, where he dug his hands deep to control me. This man announced that I would most likely need many exorcisms, where the others only needed 2 or 3 a year to keep the demons at bay. I drove my fingernails so deep into my palms that they bled, dripping onto the floor, a stigmata born in fury. After my public shaming, he announced it was time, and he would rid me of the devil. I felt my skin pimple at that, and the darkness whispered to me. It showed me what he did to the kids, and what he was going to do to me. Turning to look into the pastor's eyes, I felt my rage become white hot. No longer in control, I cupped his face, placing my palms on his cheeks. Scared and angry, all I wanted to do was hurt him. His beady little eyes met mine, and I saw him for what he was. His crimes of the last few decades burned into my memory. He groomed dozens of boys to obey, and to be silent. The blood of my palms ran down his face and neck like bloody tears. I dropped into the endless dark and became an observer for the darkness inside me. I said with a voice far older than mine, "You are the only devil here." The pastor backed away, fear filling his eyes. His face was smeared with my blood. I walked towards him, somehow looming over his pathetic frame. He collapsed to his knees and stared up at me, like a mouse in the shadow of a cat. He prayed to God for forgiveness, and I waited for a response.
God did not answer,
The darkness said, speaking through me. When he reopened his eyes, in the silence after his prayer, I could see my reflection in his tear-welled eyes. I levitated over him, my presence overwhelming the space despite my minuscule structure. In my shadow, you are hidden from God's light. The words rolled off my tongue. There is no room in heaven for pedophiles, but the demons of hell aren't so picky with their toys. The acrid smell of urine filled my nose, and I blacked out completely. I heard the screams in the distance as I drifted through a void. I felt warm, safe, and this time when I woke up, the police questioned me. Apparently no child witnessed what happened to the kind pastor and his staff. Somehow, something savagely tore apart, with no one seeing a thing. My mother knew it was me, and the guilt of bringing a demon child into this world was too much. She tried to suffocate me in my sleep, only to find her hands unable to clench around my throat. She killed herself a week later. Claws on metal stirred me awake, and once again I was guided to the armory. All I could think about was the cyborg's words. Fight for us. That's what I intended to do. I picked up my usual bastard sword. If I had any humanity left, I would probably be nervous. There was no saying what I was going against, how many there were going to be, and if they were human or not. I just had to roll with it. When I walked out, the other gates opened. I inspected my opponents as I usually did before the horn. There were 4 men, all with different swords, all different builds. I couldn't tell what time they were from, but none of them were speaking English. Then I felt my jaw tighten. One contestant was a little girl curled up on the ground, no older than 8. I felt my stomach sink, and the thought of my daughter rushed into my mind. The horn blew, and the men rushed at each other, ignoring the child. I stood completely still, and the little girl looked up at me through matted hair, tears running down her face. I recognized the abject terror of a child facing the inconceivable. Running towards her, I intersected the 4 men fighting and twirled between them, sending viscous ribbons of blood into the dirt. In quick, savage movements, I slashed open 2 of the warriors' throats, and the other 2 were shoveling his guts back into their abdomen or staring at the bloody stumps where their hands were. With my sword dripping with blood, I walked towards the young girl. She shuffled away from me like a scared dog, and I didn't blame her. I am sure I looked like something from a nightmare. Blood, both old and new, caked my unwashed, unkempt body, and my sword dripped with it. She backed up against the wall, whimpering, her breath hitching in that way a child does when they are upset. I dropped my sword onto the dirt and kneeled in front of her. "Come here, honey. I won't hurt you," I said in the same soft, comforting voice I spoke to my daughter. Her eyes were wild and fearful. She looked at my extended hand like it bore a knife. I couldn't help but see my little girl in her, the little girl that was torn from me far too soon. I met my wife in that transitory state between adolescence and adulthood, when I had the rights of a man, but the hormones and habits of a boy dictated my actions. Rage and hate were all the world had given me, and the darkness, always gnawing at my mind. She saw through me and quieted the dark like no one else could. I met her at this hole-in-the-wall bar that she had no right being in, especially alone. Ex-cons, future cons, neo-Nazis, and all those types frequented it, the types I liked to pick fights with, which was especially easy considering I was ethnically ambiguous enough to be on their radar. So when this petite Latina girl walked in, you could hear a pin drop. Everyone turned their heads, some in admiration, others with prejudice. With the sweetest voice you could imagine, she ordered a drink that the bartender refused to give her, gesturing to the sign saying they could refuse service to anyone. I sauntered up and told the man to give her the drink. I had broken his hand 6 months prior, not to mention all the men he had seen me smash to pieces. So when I asked him things, he listened. Of course, my swagger didn't charm her, and when a man with a shaved head spat at us, uttering a slur, she stopped me, gently holding my clenched fist, quenching my rage before I had even realized it had taken hold. She introduced herself as Lenina, and I told her my name, Gabriel. After that night, we were inseparable. She was the first truly good thing in my life, and sent me on the path to be a better person. I joined an MMA gym as an outlet for my rage, and a few years later became an instructor. Lenina was a teacher, and even though we were an odd pair, we worked well. The darkness barely spoke to me then, only occasionally whispering gentle reminders it was still there, watching. With her, I never got angry like before. Lenina became pregnant, and I almost ran, but with that eerie precognition she seemed to have, she caught me. I explained I had never wanted to be a parent, that the abuse done to me would trickle down, that the abuse I had survived would destine me to be a horrible father to our child, like a generational curse. She held me and told me she knew I would be a good father, not just because she had known me for years, but because the fact I was worried showed I cared enough to be better. I was too. I became a great father, the kind I wish I had. That little girl was my world. I lived and breathed her joy and happiness. We named her Maria after Lenina's mother, and every time I held her, I felt complete. Then I descended into our dark basement to replace a blown bulb. 1 second I was stepping on the familiar old wood, creaking beneath my feet, with the sound of cartoons only a room away. The next moment I felt like I missed a step and I tumbled into a cell. When I looked up from where I had fallen, there was no portal, no hole back to where I had come. There was only stone. This little girl had the same dark hair and dark eyes as Maria. "Come with me, I will protect you," I whispered. Then a raucous roar erupted from above, and what sounded like chants in that alien language they spoke. The very air vibrated with violence, and I could feel tremors through the ground from their stomping. The darkness whispered in my ear,
"They are saying to kill her."
I felt my heart drop, and I felt stupid. Of course they wanted me to kill her. She was in the ring, therefore she couldn't leave with me. I felt the icy embrace of dread as I pondered my next choice. If I killed her, then no, I would not. If I killed myself, then her fate would definitely be worse. What if I refused? I walked closer to the mewling child and reached out for her. She thrashed at me first, but I wrapped my arms around her to pick her up. She fought at first, and I said, "It's okay, I got you." I carried the girl in my arms towards my gate. I heard humans cheer, and I heard the creatures roar in savage protestations. The horn blared, but the gate did not open. "It's going to be okay. Just stay right here." I set her down, and she looked up at me with those fearful eyes. When I turned around, 2 of the robed crocodilian creatures were stalking towards me with their grasping spears. I reached out to my sword mentally and felt its weight in my spectral grasp. I lifted it from the ground and pulled it towards me, spinning. They didn't see it coming. The spinning sword decapitated the robed lizard on the left, and it cut the other one to its spine.
"This will be fun."
The darkness whispered.
"I can help."
The darkness whispered, and I felt my sanity give to the madness of anger. It boiled inside me, like a volcano ready to erupt. I hated this place, these creatures, what my life had become, and most of all, myself. I loathed my choices that had brought me here, even if I didn't understand why. Yet, why didn't I think about a way out? Why did I just accept things happening to me without trying to change them? I realized that this is what I had always done, every step of the way. Anger was easier than fixing my problems. I would lash out at life like it had tormented me. Lenina taught me that wasn't right, that there was more to life. Only now, in this hell, there was nothing holding me back. I had the power to change my life, and now this little girl's. Perhaps everyone in here. More of the robed creatures emerged from the other gates, and I dispatched them in the same fashion. They didn't know how to parry a levitating blade, and even when they were ready, they fell victim to my spectral reach.
"Yes, yes."
The darkness cheered, and I could feel its cold tendrils reaching into me. The dark crowd above jeered and roared as the humans in the cells shouted with joy. More creatures poured in now, and the cells of non-human prisoners clanged open. These fucking monsters don't know who they're dealing with, I said through clenched teeth. I closed my eyes and extended my spectral reach out, grasping all the fallen weapons. The creatures poured in, and I lifted the discarded weapons and sent them in deadly arcs, shredding everything that entered the arena in a tornado of steel and blood. I felt exhaustion hit me like a ton of bricks, and I fell to my knees. I looked back at the girl, and she had her legs to her chest, eyes wide with fear. Then, something large descended from the stands above. It crashed to the center of the arena with a thunderous clap that made my ears ring. The creature stood on 2 legs, had 4 mighty arms, and bat-like wings. Its head was a mass of writhing tentacles, each spotting a toothy mouth at the end. I used my last bit of strength and sent all the weapons towards its head at once. The dozens of glinted silver and steel shot like bullets towards the monster. But with the swipe of its massive clawed arm, it sent nearly all the weapons flying in shattered bits. The ones that struck sank superficially into its flesh. I felt the weight of using these gifts on my body. Exhaustion was hammering me back to my knees. I could barely stay conscious, but the creatures were still flooding in, and the giant winged monstrosity was now coming closer. How could I let this happen? Was I really this weak? I had these gifts, and I really am falling short.
You need more, little Gabriel?
The darkness asked. I didn't have the strength to answer. Then I heard the girl scream, and I snapped around to see something that looked like a shark and an insect fused together, lifting her towards its mouth. Rage, the color of the unfiltered sun, ignited all the energy I had left, and I said, yes. I felt energy hit my system like a shot of adrenaline. My spectral arms reached into the shark monster, gripping it from the inside, and pulled it apart. In a matter of seconds, the creature went from solid to a red mist. I leaped towards the mess and caught the girl before she hit the ground. The terror in her eyes kept the fury in me white hot. I turned back towards the growing number of creatures. I looked down at the girl in my arms and knew I had to protect her. The growing mob of horrors came cautiously closer, not knowing what I was fully capable of. I told the darkness what it had wanted to hear for ages. Give it all to me. It crackled.
You won't regret it.
I felt my body become hot, like the rage was a physically manifesting force outside my body. The scars on my back burned like fresh wounds. And then I felt it. The change. The power. It was a complete perception change. Mentally, I could feel every living thing around me. I could hear their heartbeats, feel the blood flowing through their veins. I could hear their twisted thoughts. You're all dead, I said through clenched teeth, but it resonated psychically as well. I could see the telepathic message reaching the creatures in a wave around me. Some stopped mid-step. Others laughed it off with insecure bravado. Then some could feel what was coming. I could see their thoughts and taste their fears. I swept my arms, and every creature immediately around me burst into a mist of gore and viscera. The tall, tentacled thing reared back like a frightened horse. I levitated from the ground towards the massive beast. It slashed at me with claws that would cut through a redwood, but I raised my hand towards its savage attack, stopping it mid-air. The darkness was laughing with a sardonic joy, observing the monster it created with monstrous joy. I crushed the thing's head in my spectral grip, and then I gripped every cell bar, pulled them from their frames, and impaled every remaining creature in a rain of iron. I rose into the top of the helix, smashing every living thing I could sense. I felt each death like I was smashing a grape between my fingers. Their bones crunched as easily as potato chips between teeth. For the first time since being deposited into this prison, I felt joy. I smiled as the blood rained down into the area in colorful, viscous geysers. There was nothing these monsters could do. There was no escape. They shot strange weapons at me, but their projectiles stopped midair and returned to them with double the force. My rage shifted to something else. Not fury, not vengeance, but elation. Like a vengeful god, I was gleefully killing these monsters. I told myself as I crushed their skulls that this was protection, that I didn't actually enjoy the violence. I was happy knowing it was a stepping stone on my way home. Something bellowed at me, and I felt it in every cell of my body. Then it spoke in my mind, telling me to return to my cell or else it would destroy me. The thing crawled from the darkness above, like a spider on a wall. Silent, black, and covered in eyes, the creature watched me. "Did you bring me here?" I demanded. In a voice that boomed, its voice resonating so violently that I felt my bones rattle. It told me the Colosseum is its design, and that I have destroyed what it built. I now wasted all its time gathering the collection of fighters, only for me to run wild, thirsting for blood. It then said, "I will know its wrath." My nails dug into my palms at the audacity of the creature. My spectral arms, strengthened with fury, reached towards the creature, grasping it like a helpless toad in a child's hand. "Take me back," I demanded, and the creature chuckled in response and fought against my telekinetic hold. I reached for the bars below, pulling them from the pinned creatures, and they shot up from below. It threatened me with abstract pain that I couldn't comprehend. It didn't work. "Take me back." I gripped tighter, pulling an arm out. "I will tear you apart." The first of the metal bars struck its arm, pinning it to the wall. The dozens of eyes all turned in unison, but there was no other reaction. I felt it fight against me, and the mental strain was becoming too much. Its eyes fixed on mine, and I could see the centuries of torture it caused. It pulled from my mind, projecting images of my wife and daughter being torn apart by the monsters below. Dozens of the metal bars struck its body, impacting with such force the stone wall cracked. They kept coming, filling its body like a pincushion. I felt the darkness, no longer a niggling voice in the back of my mind, but a second hand on my wheel, becoming giddy at the bloodthirst.
"You are killing a god,"
it said in my mind as the abyssal creature fought against its iron impalements. "This thing is no god of mine." I pulled the iron bars embedded in its body outwards, before it finally screamed for me to stop. I felt a shift in the air, and I looked below. A swirling, radiant blackness filled up a corner of the Colosseum. It told me through its shrieks that everyone who enters the portal will be returned to the moment they were taken. I left the creature there, pinned like a butterfly to a display case. The remaining humans reached up towards me like an angel descending from heaven, until I got close. Their faces twisted in fear at my sight. Some screamed, others cursed while the rest stood paralyzed in fear. They ran to the far end of the circle, trying to get as far from me as possible. Why would they do this? Don't they know I saved them? That I, for once, fought for them. Not for these monsters, not solely for me, but for us. These ungrateful motes of insignificant dust. Something struck me and interrupted my thoughts. I felt the burning sensation in my chest, and when I looked down, I saw a spear embedded in my ribs. I looked in the direction it had come from, and saw a young man, still frozen with his arm extended from the throw. "You ungrateful little..." My vision turned red, and I pulled the spear from my chest and threw it at him. It passed through his chest and two other people behind him before striking the wall. "Don't you see? I gave us a way out." I pointed towards the shifting dark of the portal. A man shouted that he didn't know where that went, and he wasn't going anywhere with a monster like me. I stretched my arm towards him and felt the spectral arm reach as well. He couldn't see me grip his entire skull in that invisible hand, and he didn't feel it when I crushed his head like a grape. "Stay here then, you pitiful, ungrateful shits." I sauntered towards the portal and saw the little girl from before staring at me. When I met her eyes and extended my hand, she turned away. Approaching her, others screamed, calling me a monster. I kneeled down like I did before and said, "Honey, you're safe now. I can take you home." I reached for her, but she screamed and scrambled away. I clenched my fist and walked through and back into my basement. The space was smaller than I remembered, but it had been a long time for me, even if it was only moments for my family here. I located the light bulb and changed it. With a new golden illumination filling the space, I searched myself for something. A feeling, a sensation of relief, happiness that now I could go upstairs and see my wife and daughter. I heard her little giggle from the cartoons directly above me, and I felt nothing. There was no love in me, no joy, and no happiness for being back. I felt the anger boil up inside me as I heard the darkness's voice say,
I keep what you trade. That is the deal.
I turned towards the basement stairs and glimpsed myself in a mirror. A previous owner left it behind, covered in dust and cobwebs, but the reflection looked wrong. I walked closer, seeing that my frame was not right, that my skin was the wrong color. I reached out to wipe the dust off, but stopped with my hand extended. My flesh was different, no longer the chestnut brown, with fine black hairs going up my forearm. Instead, my arm was a mottled, leprous black and gray, with a taloned hand at the end. "What did you do to me?" I seethed at the darkness.
I gave you what you asked for.
It whispered.
Power.
I wanted to thrash, destroy, take my rage out on whatever was near me. I wanted to kill. Then, realizing what that sensation was, I tried to push it down. Then I heard the basement door open. A little familiar voice called out for me. I wanted to run to her, to hold her in my arms, but I knew how she would react. I darted towards the bulkhead doors leading to the backyard. Throwing them open, I left into the night. I couldn't bear the sight of me, the feeling of me, and I knew my family wouldn't either. Better for them to think I abandoned them than to see what I have become. There was nothing left, not my flesh, not my personality. The only thing left was my rage, and the voice that whispered to me from the endless dark. What did you think of this terrific short horror story? Comment or email redtreehousepod@gmail.com. A huge shout out to Otero for submitting it. It's always a privilege to narrate these original stories on the show. As we turn down the lights on this episode, make plans to join me next time as I read A Collection of Short Horror Stories, Volume 5. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.
Thank you.